G'day and welcome to the first episode of the Make It Make Sense YouTube channel / podcast, maybe. As you can see, I'm here in my garage studio. No expenses been spared. I've got my gym, the Australian national flag, my Make It Make Sense flag in the back. I think there's a motorbike down here somewhere. There's a canoe up there. So you know that it's authentic and I'm not some paid and bought for YouTube or Instagram reel guy. So onward. For some of you that aren't used to seeing my hairy face on your screen, I'll introduce myself. But for those already initiated from Instagram and Facebook, here's a repeat for you. My name is Dean Burgess. I'm an ex-2nd Commando Regiment operator from the Australian Army Special Forces. And why I have you here today, we're not talking about what happened in Afghanistan in the way that the media usually spins it. We're talking about what happened after the war, when the institutions turned their attention to the very soldiers they sent there to do their bidding. Namely, the Brereton Inquiry was sold as accountability for the masses. But for some of the men who went through it, the process itself became the trauma. One of those men is Heston Russell. And what he put on record should make every Australian sit up and ask serious questions. I should point out that I'm friends with Heston and he's a good man. Heston Russell, former major within the SOTG, National President of Veteran Support Force, founder of Voice of a Veteran, gave evidence to the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide on the 3rd of December 2021. He spoke about moral injury, the failed release of the Brereton Report, the lack of positive messaging from government around Special Forces, and the suicide crisis.
Huge part in relating this back to just suicide prevention and mental health support specifically is Defence is fantastic at indoctrinating people into service and issuing them with an identity that puts their personal identity subordinate to that of the collective identity of the group, and also provides them with a purpose that is able to motivate them at the intrinsic level. Just like we deploy our servicemen and women overseas and we take them through such mature cultural training to understand the human terrain and the nature of the environment we're going to go into, we don't sit down and explain to our defence personnel that life outside of the Defence Force doesn't hold those same values that you are instilled and held accountable against each and every day via the system, by yourself and by those you serve with, as it does in the Defence Force. And they find themselves within looking for careers that they're looking for purpose as well as personal profit to survive, and are unable to achieve that sustainment and personal fulfillment. And when they transition, one of the first things we do is we get them to hand in their identification card. The amount of veterans I've spoken to, and I know myself included, driving past the Gallipoli barracks, you long to be able to go back onto that base, just to be able to go and work out at the gym and be around people. You long to be connected back to that community. And this is one of the biggest issues, is when we transition veterans, they lose that connection. And it is that moral connection back to that tribe. And by going from the Department of Defence to the Department of Veterans Affairs, you're asking this person to manufacture a new connection to an organisation where they then have to be their most vulnerable. And finally, for the first time in their life, having to put themselves first, usually at a time when they are the most vulnerable because they actually need to receive medical treatment, or they've been stuck in this further perpetuation of their identity being defined by how many incapacity points they deserve, how much compensation they deserve. None of these are any of the character traits that are instilled and were essentially the best version of themselves, as too much of us find ourselves comparing ourselves to. And it perpetuates down this new mindset that, particularly given the protracted nature of how long claims come, the people who don't fully understand the unique nature of service and try to manufacture empathy with veterans and builds an adversarial process. And it's psychological warfare 101. Expose someone to something for long enough, it's going to have an impact on them. And when people are then spending 1, 2, 3, 5 years engaging with a claims process that ends to develop this psychological indication of their own personal derived value given the demerit points or the financial compensation they receive as a measurement of a success, then that's what they become. They become their grief. They become their trauma.
But it's what he detailed in his written personal submissions to that same Royal Commission and expanded on in his book and podcasts that hits different. Now, I'm going to quote Heston. During that interview, I broke down and became the most emotional I have ever been. I don't say that lightly. I requested to leave the room on 3 different occasions, and on every occasion, I was denied. I am openly embarrassed at the state I became and still reflect upon this. So emotional that I didn't know what to do. I have never felt that way before or again since. And I know that I have lived through some absolute extremes in combat, but it hit me at a level where I was made believe that I had endangered the lives and livelihoods of my soldiers, their families, and discredited my entire service performance. And I was then provided with a card for a number to call if I needed help. Heston continues, this interview was recorded. I would suggest, if not request, the Royal Commission exercise your coercive powers to simply listen to the audio of when I have had my breakdown in this interview. There is no operational security issues that arise or can be said to be compromised in doing so. Just listening to these few minutes. You need to hear the emotional state that I was taken to. I still can't believe it myself. I would ask you to do this to appreciate the impact this has had on so many by way of which these interviews were conducted. This actually caused me trauma and left me at my most vulnerable and impacted while least supported in my entire career. Now here's the killer line that got me while I was reading it. I quote, I didn't suffer any PTSD symptoms until I met the Brereton Inquiry team in early 2019. So now, this isn't some anonymous claim. This is a decorated veteran major on record telling the Royal Commission that the very process meant to deliver justice left him more broken than anything he had faced in combat. And he's seen a lot. He asked them to listen to the audio, and did they? We don't know. But what we do know is that this pattern is not an isolated incident. Now, obviously, before I mentioned that I was in one of the special forces groups that the Australian Army has, so I'm pretty well connected through those channels, and I still speak to a lot of the guys pretty regularly, if not daily. Multiple former special forces operators have described similar experiences in podcast and private accounts. Aggressive, psychologically intense interviews that felt more like interrogations designed to break people than fact-finding exercises. The blooding allegations in Brereton were one thing. The way some witnesses were treated during the inquiry is a total different thing. The institutions love to talk about trauma-informed approaches. Where was that when these men were in the room? They were sent to war under rules of engagement that were robust, as Prime Minister Gillard herself said in 2010. Then years later, they're hauled in, made to feel they endangered their mates and families, denied basic requests to step out when they're breaking down, and handed a phone number on a card as aftercare service. This is the same system that later had the audacity to investigate veteran mental health and suicide. The irony for me is sickening. But it gets worse, because when the Royal Commission itself asked for the data on how many of these witnesses had since taken their own lives or attempted suicide, the evidence for this was destroyed. So, I want you to comment below. Does this sound like fair accountability to you? Share this if you think veterans deserve better. I will put the full sources in the description. Please subscribe and hit the bell for episode 2 on the destroyed list. Look after each other and never forget what these men went through in combat and after. Follow for more of the truth that they won't tell you in the mainstream media. Share this with the people that you care about. The fight continues. Make it make sense.